Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the C-Man, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the C-Man's Cinema Sit Down. If you've been following along today, you know it's New Year's Eve, December 31st, and I'm trying to get in the last of the reviews I need to get in before I get to like my top 10s and anything like that. I kicked off my day around noon. We have now moved on to the point where I've started my celebrating. The first beer is up here. The hair's getting out of control. Jesus. Yeah, it has been a day, a lot of fun. I love talking movies, and I'm really pumped to talk about this next one because I'm always pumped to talk about Pixar films, but I've never actually talked about a Pixar film that I felt was made for adults. Look, all Pixar films can hit home with adults. Heck, most Pixar films make us adults cry. But for me, watching this movie, I didn't really see anywhere other than the animation and the cat element of the movie where you were making a movie that was for kids. At the oldest, maybe teenagers would be able to take something really important away from this. But it was kind of fun as an adult who consumes a lot of Pixar content to watch a Pixar movie that felt like it was being made for me. And not just me, but, you know, my parents, and just like for the adult community, people who are out in the world, who have the perspective of the world, but also have a job or things that can kind of lock you in from really living life. And that's one of the main, things you take away here is remembering to stop, look around, and take in and live life just as much as it is to, go and do all the things you need to live, right? And that's one of the things that I love about this movie. So why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We are getting ready to dive in, spoiler-free, into Disney Pixar's Soul. I loved this film. As I was saying, from a story standpoint, this is a movie that totally could speak to me. It could speak to, my parents. Heck, it could even speak to my grandparents, depending on the perspective you're taking as far as living your life. And I think, at those different stages, someone who's in the early stages of adulthood, versus, someone who is in that, like, mid to late life end and has a family and stuff like that, or the elderly side where you're a grandparent. I think all three of those demographics would take something drastically different, albeit in the same vein, away from the movie. And they really do hit home on this concept of like actually understanding what life should be about. Look, we all have things that we have to do. Some of us have the fortunate ability to work in a profession that they love, but not everybody has that. Some of us have, good family relationships. Others don't. And these are all things and distractions that can come in from the outside world that can kind of box us in. And our main character here, Joe, who's voiced by Jamie Foxx, is one of those aspiring musicians. He's always wanted to make it big. And the best he's ever done is land a job as a music teacher. And he kind of feels like he's at, like a dead end. Like he's just got nowhere left to go. He needs a break. And he gets that break, and within hours, moments of getting that break and having that moment where you think it's gonna happen, not paying attention, we've seen it in the trailer, falls down a manhole cover and quote-unquote dies. His soul at least leaves his body. He ends up in the hospital like in a coma. But his soul leaves his body, and the whole concept of the movie is because he doesn't want to go to the great beyond yet, he tries to escape and instead ends up where souls are born, and where you learn to be whatever it is you need to be the soul before you come to Earth. And that's where he runs into Tina Fey's character, named 22, who is a soul who just refuses to leave. You have a little sticker, and you got to fill up all the things, and the last thing on the sticker hasn't filled up for her, so she's been there a long time. And Joe's whole thing through the whole movie is, I have to figure out how to get back into my body. And the movie executes on all that stuff in ways that you don't expect. It kind of takes you on this roller coaster where that's the main objective. The whole movie is for him to get to his body and to maybe make 22 get what she needs to become a soul herself, maybe. That's kind of the, whether or not 22 wants to actually leave for Earth and have a life is kind of the thing that her character is dealing with, while Joe is dealing with wanting to get back to the world because he's finally made his break and now life ends. And these are really real concepts, right? Like, obviously not for people that are living, but we know people who have died far too early, man. I have friends that have passed suddenly and not gotten to live full lives, and can understand that concept. Whether it's your parents or your aunts or uncles or just people that that are older than I am, kind of seeing people get to that place where it's like, where do I go from here? Like, I'm supposed to do more than this, and I've had that in my own personal experiences, and that's something that the movie kind of speaks to, and the way that it goes about that, and what that means, trying to look for that break, and whether or not that break is truly what it is to live. You know what I mean? Like, depending on the person, maybe what you think you need is what you need, or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's something different. And I like the way that the movie explores all those things. And when it comes to the animation, I mean, we know what Pixar is capable of, right? Like, backgrounds and the real life, real world settings that look so tangible and so real pop here, specifically the streets of the city. When you're walking around, it captures what it's like to walk around the city, and the visual look of things is just spectacular. But my favorite visuals in the movie are of the two soul worlds. You have the Great Beyond, which I guess isn't really, you don't really go there. It's a big bright light per se. Like, the Great Beyond is this way. Then you have like the ramp that leads you to the Great Beyond. We spent a lot of time there. And then the Great Before, where souls are first conceived, and like I said, kind of attain different elements to become a personality. And the last thing they need is their spark, is what they call it in the Great Before. That's the thing that 22 is missing. She needs her spark in order to go to Earth to become a person. So the visuals in the Great Before, and everything from the Great Before to the Great Beyond, are just spectacular. That elevator, escalator thing, the path to the Great Beyond, I love, man. The way that you get there, like the way that you have to travel, it's like kind of trippy, but that bright, beautiful contrast of white and dark and black. Like, they really contrast those and send them at you in ways where it's like almost like waves, and then when you get there, just like what you're looking at almost has kind of like a space concept, but it's just is crystal and gorgeous. But then when you're in the Great Before also like looks very inviting, like fields and things like that, and it's got this kind of softness to it. But my favorite thing are the beings that inhabit these places. You have Terry, who is a soul counter, who works on the people who are headed to the Great Beyond. And then you have the Jerrys, which basically they're like, the greater life form that like can create all this, but they take this form that they give them in the movie so that souls can kind of react to them and understand. And the visual look is really, really fascinating. Like, Terry has a simpler concept from the Jerrys that really works and allows Terry to go, and how Terry moves in and out of the world is really, really cool. But then the Jerrys have like that element plus this extra thing where it's like sometimes when you look at it, you're like, oh, that's it's almost like this like kind of crazy art. And it was honestly, anytime you're in the soul worlds, it's like you're watching art come to life. And the one other place that they go to is kind of like where the lost souls end up. And that's wild, man. Like, the things that they create in that world. It's just like, oh, it is one of those visually just very stimulating movies. And then you hammer in this unbelievable, like, really legit take. And it didn't feel like, sometimes it feels like Pixar is looking to strike that emotional chord. And it never had that feeling for me. It just kind of went about its business and had these really deep emotional concepts that struck a chord with me, that made me roll a tear. But were things that were clearly being written for me, and they played even better than normal. And then when you add in the performances, you have Jamie Foxx playing Joe. Exactly what you would expect from Jamie Foxx. He has enough of a tweak on his voice that it really does become Joe's, and the places that he takes it are fun. The way that Joe reacts to things and what Joe's perspective is in the movie versus 22's. I just really enjoy seeing that stuff and watching him go from being a person to being a soul to stumbling into the great before. Like, you see, like, when souls they have mentors, so there are souls in the great before that have passed from Earth and are on their way to the great beyond, but before getting there become mentors and kind of come back and mentor the new souls so that they can find their spark and go on. And seeing how that is done, and then seeing how they have those mentors try to get that spark for the new souls, was just fun to watch. And to see Joe try to navigate that the way that he tries to navigate it just gave Foxx a lot of room to breathe and do things that were interesting to the character. However, the all-star of this movie for me is Tina Fey. She is just, she's so good. And she really does have a way of, you don't even realize it's Tina Fey unless somebody tells you it's Tina Fey. And then occasionally you can pick up on like hints of her, but she found a voice that completely allowed her to lose herself and become 22. And 22 is awesome because you could look at this and go, oh, well, you have Joe, who's an adult, and then you have 22, who's a new soul. So you have a kid-adult relationship. So, like, there's got to be some stuff written for like, the kid audience. And it's not that, because she is soul number 22. So imagine how many souls there are in the world and go, huh, she's 22 and no number gets recycled. She has been there for centuries. It would seem like. It seems like she's been there a long time. And the concept that I thought was genius to 22 is that she's an old soul. And you kind of get the idea, like, she's way older than any other soul is, but if a soul lasted or stayed behind long enough, maybe that's why, you know, people on Earth have old souls. It was a concept I thought the movie might play with at the end of the toward the end of the movie, and it doesn't really at all. But clearly, Faye's character in 22 is an old soul, and it has a much more adult perspective. And the way that she tackles what she's going through as far as finding her spark and why she's never left or found her spark, and if she even wants to move on to Earth, I just loved the way that she works with that and plays with it, and the emotional places that she has to take 22 to are a lot of fun, and they're also heartbreaking. And the relationship between Joe and 22 is just wonderful. I don't know if Tina and Jamie were in the same place at the same time, acting off each other, but the chemistry between their voice performances really meshed, where it was like, this is a duo I really liked a lot, which then in turn puts a lot, like, increases the stakes. You know, the stakes in the movie are pretty big because you're dealing with souls, and those performances and that chemistry is what makes this whole movie work, you know, on top of the writing and the animation. And the two of them knock it out of the ballpark. And then the rest of the cast is just littered with, you know, all sorts of fantastic names. People like Graham Norton, who plays Moonwind. He's a character that kind of deals with the lost soul bit, and he is zany and wild, and Norton crushes it. You have the two Jerrys that are played by Alice Braga and Richard Ayoade. And, you know, they're pretty simple, but some of the jokes they have, specifically toward the end of the movie, and specifically in their interactions with Terry, are fantastic. And then Terry is voiced by Rachel House, perfect for what that character is. Like, when you see the character and you hear the voice that comes out, you're like, nailed it. And I like how they utilize Terry in the story, and like I said, that relationship and the way they play with Terry and the Jerrys is a lot of fun. And then, you know, even in the real world, I mean, we have, you know, people like Felicia Rashad and Donnell Rawlings, Questlove, Angela Bassett, Daveed Diggs, everybody that pops up in here, whether they're playing, you know, a barber that's, you know, from where Joe lives, or his parents, or the women that are in the, you know, store that she works in, or, you know, the people that are in the band and in the music scene. That's the other thing. The music in the movie is great. You know, he's a jazz blues player, and you really, you know, find where that soul comes in and what happens when you're playing music and how they utilize music and just give that scene and you get to play with that stuff. Wonderful for the movie. And at the end of the day, like I said, this for me is one of Pixar's best outings. And I think the reason it feels that way is because it's a movie that I feel like was intentionally for me. It wasn't like a movie that I enjoyed that's for a kid to enjoy but has adult themes. Like this one was straight up an adult Pixar movie, and it was awesome. I loved how deep it went, and I love the places that it went to. So for me, Soul, big old bucket of win, man. Pixar just always knows how to get me. I love them Pixar movies. But this, I loved the idea of being able to create a movie that you could totally take your kids to. Like, this isn't a movie that's like, oh man, this is an adult movie you can't take your kids to. They will. Like I said, there's a cat element to the movie, and there is some fun, and like I said, the animation is really cool. They'll enjoy the movie, but I think adults are going to take way more away from this. And for me, that's kind of cool because I'm an adult to a degree, I guess. You could consider me an adult based on age alone. But anyways, I loved me some Soul. The question is, did you? Let me know everything you were thinking. Good, bad, indifferent on Soul. What'd you think of Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey? What'd you think of the concept? Did you think this was a movie that was geared more toward adults than kids? What'd you think of the animation, music? Anything that was working, good, bad, indifferent, on Soul goes down below in the comment section. If you haven't checked it out, have I enticed you? You gotta go pop over to Disney Plus. Throw it on. If you have Disney Plus and you haven't, totally worth a watch. So I hope I have enticed you. But anything you're thinking, down below. Look forward to talking to you guys in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the old C-Man anytime we're talking movies, trailers. You want to be here for the end of the day when we get the top 10. You just like what we're doing and want to show a little support. Boom! Jump over there. Join C-Maniac Nation by hitting that subscribe button. Hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the C-Man Cinema Sit Down, I've been the C-Man. I am signing off. Peace! Well, that's all live and breathe. You still here? Check out a video like this one, or this one, and hit the subscribe button so you can get alerts and check out everything the C-Man's got at the Cinema Sit Down.